There's few games out there that let you play the villain, and fewer still that do it right. But it's quite common for Obsidian Entertainment to make such an experience satisfying and believable. Tyranny is an example of Obsidian's thought-provoking morality systems, challenging characters, and means of making you see ideologies differently. The game is supposed to be about evil winning the battle of good versus evil, but evil is a strong word. Lawful evil would be more appropriate, with culture, history and national pride being replaced with strict laws, a total shift in how trade and education work, and homogenization with public attitudes. Nobody can deny the practicality of their new overlord's rule on the continent of Tyranny, but they yearn for the days when they could sing about past glories and not have to worry about the many rather than the few. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning, or as close as we can in the sense that we know it. Tyranny is being dominated by the overlord Kairos, and has been so far successful and swept through the land without much meaningful resistance. Kairos' origins are unclear. In fact, much of Kairos is unclear. Few are willing to say what he or she looks or sounds like, and I doubt those who have seen the Overlord in person could even begin to. Sources vary, but the most trustworthy agents of Kairos refer to the Overlord as a female. Not that it really has any bearing on anything. Kairos always has been, and always will be. So is she a goddess? Is she the avatar of order or chaos? The game is frustrating with how it teases players, and tempting fate is discouraged just enough for your curiosity to not get the best of you. Kairos has two ways of getting her, or their means, her edicts and the Archons. Edicts are the most powerful magics in this game's universe, and Kairos will only use them when necessary. These scrolls require one of their most trusted mortal agents to read the contents to activate them, and usually have some condition to end their terrors. Normally there's some kind of elemental fury that devastates an area, and in true Obsidian fashion, in great detail. But players have to deliver the most destructive edict yet. Though not before I talk about the Archons. Kairos is everywhere, and she can sniff out potential generals with ease. Any who show great magic potential or knowledge can become an Archon, the greatest person to understand or even create a particular subject. To provide some examples, the Archon of Pestilence was born with the ability to summon flies and disease against those who aggravate her. However, like all the Archons, she has her flaws, and died from any number of self-inflicted plagues in her early 20s. The Archon of Misery is a torturer, but cares not for using his godly interrogation techniques for information. He inflicts pain because that's what he does. There's a great many Archons out there, but few matter in the tale of Tyranny. Now, within Kairos' empire exist two armies, the Disfavored and the Scarlet Chorus, led by Graven Asher and the Voices of Narat, respectively. The Archon of War leads the Disfavored, the elite minority in the ranks. He has the ability to see and direct any battle his soldiers are in, regardless of where he is. He's also able to heal his troops from otherwise fatal blows and dull the pain of a wound that would drive any other soldier mad. Critics say that this makes his troops complacent, and Asher is often called out for being too cautious, though not by his own naturally.
Modesty is your prerogative, but know that cooperation and goodwill have been rarities of late. You do your Lord Tunon a great honor by aiding your cousins in the Disfavored.
The Archon of Secrets sometimes leads the Scarlet Chorus, and leads being a word I use so generously I ought to be called the Archon of Charity.
So you found your backbone at last! Oh, we were worried past humiliations would make you soft, timid.
The Chorus is blamelessly thought of as little more than an armed mob conscripting from conquered farms, villages and cities, or killing those who were too weak to fight. They do, however, possess fierce mages, furious soldiers, and overly zealous madmen like the Disfavored. Alas, within their ranks are thieves, rapists, and cutthroats, all things that are encouraged within the Chorus in order to survive and prove oneself superior. Now, they might not fit Kairos' image of the orderly empire to rule forever, but sometimes you need shock tactics and a wave of armed bodies to smash defences or force a surrender. For this playthrough, I favoured the Scarlet Chorus, but I'll get into how that's even an option in due course. But what about our role? Well, we serve Tunon, the Archon of Law. Seeing Kairos' advances on the bastard city caused who he once was to escalate in political power and lube up the town's collective anus. When the Overlord brought a big buggering stick, it was Tunon who convinced the people that buggery is quite nice, and softened up Kairos' entry into their rectum. The Tiers, the collective name for the realms we play in. In return for his understanding and accepting of the Overlord's colonoscopy, Tunon was transformed into an Archon, and ensures all is fair and just in the world. And we are his deputies, the Fate Binders. It is our job to resolve civil and military matters by sword or by silver tongue. Either way, we must follow Kairos' laws to the letter and execute the punishment without any ambiguity in what we mean. The more effective you are at this, the more free reign you have to perform legal activities yourself. Just don't take the piss though, because Tunon has no qualms over destroying those who deviate from the law. This means that you can't follow your personal moral compass as much as you would in any other RPG. If you are not objective and do not pass sentence accordingly, you'll make an enemy of the court. Considering how many enemies you'll make in your travels, that would be most unwise. Still, it is pretty cool how people react to your authority. You are feared and respected, and the power of your judgment being final normally puts an end to trouble. This doesn't go unpunished though. Not everyone likes Kairos laws or the means to atone for crimes. Reputations can be soiled, bribery will occur, and the threat of bleed and mark, the Archon of Shadows, is very, very real. One such time was when I had to pass judgment on a Fatebinder preventing the rape of a citizen, and having to choose between earning Tunon's wrath and the Scarlet Chorus, or condemn a deputy to death. There's many tough decisions to make. There are two defining factors of your reputation, favour and wrath. The higher your favour with a faction, the less likely they are to attack on sight and instead engage in dialogue. Your favour can waver if you do things to upset that faction, and you may end up gaining wrath as well as losing the other stat. The game doesn't explain this too well, but wrath is not something you'll want to avoid necessarily. Yes, it means factions are less cooperative in dialogue, but you gain abilities with the different tiers of wrath. In fact, the second wrath ability with the disfavoured prevents them from self-healing, so you're encouraged to fight them at every turn if they become your enemy. There's a similar system in place for companions, loyalty and fear, again determining what info you can get out of them. None of this will come into play until we've created a character though, so I reckon it's high time we talk mechanics.
What do you mean? Here, in the restaurant?
Starting off with our character's gender, we're told that men and women are equally as worthless if they don't serve the Overlord in some way. Men can own and command the seas, but cannot say the same of the land. For women, it's the opposite. They may only crew a vessel, but they're landowners and usually the best workers. Players are quite limited in cosmetic designs for characters, but that's to be expected when you can't see your characters quite as clearly as something like Baldur's Gate. From here on in character creation, choices really start to matter. Your history tells how you came into Kairos service and what life was like in the north. Besides RP value, this only determines what extra dialogue options you get. And despite being a dialogue heavy game, the diplomat option probably appeared less than 10 times in my 30-hour playthrough. Then again, history is how others relate to you. Soldiers will listen to fellow military minds, mages and intellectuals will appreciate war mages and guild apprentices, and if you have a standoff, a history of pit fighting would not go amiss. Unlike in Shadowrun with its similar dialogue options and enhancements, you can only choose one and it will remain for the entire playthrough. Next is the offensive expertise or proficiencies in combat. Here you get to choose your starting weapons and receive bonuses to them, as there's no classes as such. When you've chosen a proficiency, you also get to decide one of two abilities, and your second proficiency may complement the other and give you two moves of the same style. Mages only get one spell per school of magic to begin with, but their talent trees cater specifically to the individual schools. After that, you customize your banner, make your name, and invest your skill points. Attributes can cover your damage and resistances and can also boost your support skills, which I find far more interesting as a problem-solving character. I noticed that Law, Athletics and Subterfuge were the most useful skills for dialogue and interacting with the environment. Law dictates your understanding of the world, Athletics helps you conquer and intimidate its people, and Subterfuge lets you exploit and disarm its traps. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the Conquest screen. Conquest mode is where you decide what role the twin armies played in the taking of the tiers. In each city you're given a total of 6 parts to play out of the 10 available. You're expected to choose carefully which factions you side with, or else you'll have to deal with the ire of both armies. You can simply side with one in the quick start mode, but I only recommend that after your first playthrough when you realise just how much of the game is affected by your actions. What Conquest mode does best is demonstrate that the Fatebinder cannot be everywhere at once. You could have saved lives, prevented further animosity, or spread more fear, but who are your critics to defy the most senior and objective Archon and his deputy? You get flavor text praising and scolding you for your actions, and none of the choices lead you on. It doesn't require much to grasp the consequences. Still, you may feel guilty because things could have gone better without restarting the whole conquest, an option that is given to you at its climax, but you can only do so much. You won't have to worry about that when Kairos Peace blankets the globe, or whatever shape Terratus or the planet is. The gameplay truly begins with the Fatebinder travelling to the last battleground left to claim victory over. We're given our most important task yet, to meet with the Archons of War and Secrets in person and read aloud an edict. Sounds simple enough, we've done it once before, either in Azure, the Vellum Citadel, or Stalwart. Minor spoiler warning for you here, I'll give you a moment to pause and skip ahead.
Now, I'm only going to do this once, right? Because once I get started, I never stop. Because I am bonkers, right?
The edict we have to deliver is the most powerful spell Kairos has ever had to use. To our knowledge, anyhow. Unless the resistance movement in Vendrian's Well is obliterated and its spire captured, all living things shall be exterminated. All living things. Loyalists, traitors, disfavored, chorus, fatebinder and Archon, everyone dies. We have 8 days to get results. Graven Asher and the Voices of Narad still bicker, but agree to move things along if their soldiers currently posted elsewhere can have their issues resolved. You agree with them, get shit done, and recruit companions along the way. The first two are Verse and Barrick of the Scarlet Chorus and Disfavored. Verse is a barbaric rogue using dual daggers and a bow to sadistically strike her victims. Barrick, on the other hand, is a hulking machine of a man, his armour burnt into him after the Edict of Storm's ruined Stalwart. He's a good early game tank, but not early enough if you ask me. Even as a sword and board character, lower level fighters still kicked my arse more times than I care to recall. You know, I'm not sure why the first act is so difficult. I hardly changed my gear throughout the course of the game, simply investing in attributes and talents for myself and followers, while chugging a ton of health potions all the time. The balance is a bit skewy, but I'm not the most perceptive of such matters, that I will admit. Combat is satisfying all the same. Striking takes time, accuracy, and no small amount of luck, and there's the typical CRPG variables to keep combat from being button mashy. You have to look at opponents' weakest stats, use talents to create a gap in their armor before unleashing a critical blow with other followers' abilities in the mix. There's a lot of downtime in Tyranny's fight sequences, with lengthy global cooldowns between auto-attacks eating up most of the encounter. You'll be quick to learn that balancing the number of abilities and their effectiveness with passive effects is crucial to survival. I personally would prefer a stamina or mana pool, but I don't think the Pillars of Eternity crowd would be all too pleased. At least fast and slow modes speed up or increase time between attacks if you're not like me and pausing to pore over the tactical view. If there's one thing I can say, it's that party balance seems to be fine. You can welcome a tank, thief, healer, and 2 mage-likes to your team should you so choose. You can play solo if you're completely tonto, but you'll miss out on loyalty and fear abilities from elating or enraging companions. On the other hand, you don't have to deal with their whinging if they disagree with your faction choices. Companions have some really cool talent trees though, unique to them, and tend to cover 2 weapons and playstyle. The Fatebinder on the other hand has the same talent trees regardless of their weapon proficiencies. All they do is provide a bonus to stats and 2 chosen abilities. After character creation, you're free to be strict or mix and match to your heart's content. The freedom can be helpful though. If you or a party member have a high enough lore skill, you can learn sigils and expressions used in spellcrafting. And who doesn't want free, well, close enough to free spells to cast while their abilities are on cooldown? It beats having to spec Lantry into healing all the time or chugging your best potions before your enemy is exploded by a critical hit. You don't have to worry about combat all that much, and it's a pity the early game is a bad reflection of later acts when there's a level playing field and new threats to face. Kiting and careful pulling become natural in the second act of the game after enduring hardships or simply bumping down the difficulty to story mode to get it done and over with. I have some concerns with the power creep though. As the story goes on, you'll find high quality items called artifacts, which supposedly level up with use. By equipping the item, you get an artifact ability, which will be the bane of all who cross you, and then you find more. And more. I mean, for Christ's sakes, at the end of the game I had 7 artifacts that I remember, 3 of which I got in the final hours of the game. There was no way I could have leveled those last few by that point, let alone the rest I'd missed. This Goliath boost in power is limited in use between camping, but it cuts through bone like butter. Combined with tag team powers, reputation abilities and upgraded armor, you are a force to be reckoned with. It reached a point where, barring only a few fights, I had no need to interfere with companion AI settings. They would just fight automatically, and win. The game might as well have been on story mode, if only to make things go faster to experience the narrative. That didn't stop me from trying to avoid fights altogether. If I can clever dick or slap my way out of a battle, I'd not hesitate. Sometimes though, a big brain or other bodily muscle won't be enough, even though there's an option to get bonus XP for it. Lore, athletics and subterfuge aren't by default the best answers. You can miss vital information, opportunities to rep up, or flat out annoy someone with them. Like Pillars of Eternity, you have to expect the reaction, unless roleplay and reputation are on the line. fine. At least dialogue isn't determined by the roll of a dice. If you have enough points or are born in a certain way, you can use the alternative options when talking. And people aren't too hard to read either. The only people you have to watch your words with are the Archons, especially Tyranny. It's his business to know the loopholes and the subjective takes on the law, so he'll not tolerate you playing silly buggers like Nerat, Blade and Markwood. You can expect most NPCs to be cynical or desperate, as well as easily offended. Not that they can be blamed, they're still adapting to or resisting a regime that's been in the tiers for 3 years now. The problems in Kairos' armies are beginning to surface, and folks aren't sure they can maintain order in the long term. You are the people's last hope, and word spreads from the different provinces fast. Your inconsistent behaviour and sentences will be duly noted and reminded of if necessary. That's as far as I can get without going into major spoilers, but it covers nearly all the features I recall. Consider this another major spoiler warning.
Into the ambulance, dring, dring, dring. Fish trousers elephant in Peking. Saw a diddle-dee, diddle-diddle-dee. That is an accountant just like me. God bless.
Once the two armies have had their requirements met before the defining battle at Vendry well, it's up to you to decide who leads the charge. Only one army can do this, and the other will become your enemy throughout the rest of the game.
You test my patience, Fatebinder. We did not ask for a weak compromise that leaves all parties unsatisfied. Whom do you support?
Unless you meet some very specific requirements, you can stand with the Oathbreakers and attempt to push back Kairos' forces for an independent tiers. I haven't attempted this myself, but it is on my to-do list considering how replayable I find Tyranny to be. So you take Vendry well and claim its spire, only something strange happens. You seem to activate it. The spire awakens, and at the top you can see all around the tiers. This tower which speaks to you in visions holds tremendous power, and there's plenty more where that came from. There's now a civil war in Kairos' lands. The Disfavored and Scarlet Chorus are at each other's throats, and depending on who you're favoured, only they will respect you and the Archon of Justice. You haven't necessarily gone rogue, or at least I hadn't, and justice must be dispensed still. The Archons are on trial, and you must infiltrate and gather evidence against your chosen army, as well as discovering the crimes of the other. Who's really responsible for the chaos in the first place? Tyranny and your Fatebinder buddies will assist in person and in writing should you require a better understanding of the law. There's only one law you really need to be wary of. Do not enter the Old Walls. These are forbidden, but can contain evidence for the trial and unlock new spires for fast travel. Spires become bases of operation where you can recruit people to trade and train with, should merchants be unavailable or uncooperative elsewhere. They also increase your power level, which allows you to cast edicts of your own creation, and should you ever need to do that, you may find yourself on trial. But before I cover the graphics and soundtrack, I would just like to talk about the ending. Without spoiling too much, I don't think the ending is to blame for the disappointment many players experienced. I think it's the fault of Act 2, there's just no way the game can end on a higher note when the end of the second act is as fast and as abrupt as it is. While I think it was cool what happened, I just think it came out of nowhere and shows that maybe the developers were running out of time to wrap things up, or they simply didn't know how. I am, however, happy with the ending myself. I personally thought the end of Act 1 was the end, and I would have been happy for the game to have finished at the 4-hour mark. I'm not a huge fan of the art style Obsidian chose for this, and it's one of the reasons why it took me so long to get into the game. Tyranny's gravelly textures and assets don't help in making locations memorable, but there are some landmarks that are enhanced by them. Cutscenes feel hugely rewarding to come across when the camera glides across the rough presentation, and the particle and gore effects stand out on the sandpaper-like locations. There's something about the musty art direction that suits the setting and lore that I can't quite put my finger on. What little of the soundtrack I heard was gorgeous, if reused a whole lot, filled with triumph and gentle music alike. The silence at times helped punctuate the gravity of a situation and build up tension more than any song could. On the subject of the voice acting now, it is for the most part great. The game can get annoying when you've been listening to a character speak only for the next paragraph or so to be completely silent. And you've really got to like reading if you want to play Tyranny, but I'm sure you figured that out by now.
Something very special's happened to me. I'm in love.
Tyranny is not good because it lets me be bad. It's good because I am bad, and I'm given the choice to either have to embrace or reject it in a world that knows no better. I'm playing as someone who is brought up in a totalitarian empire, having never experienced compassion or evil in the sense that we do, under the watchful eye of a malevolent dictator god. I know what I can and can't do, but the struggle of not knowing why is ever present, and so is the urge to understand it. This is how I want to see morality done, or at least more often, not just like D&D where good and evil are physical entities, but a means of identifying words and actions as well as justifying them. I loved the characters and their motivations. I found the writing to be just right, and my eyes were glued to the screen whenever I engaged in dialogue. And it has to be said that I never felt like there was a lack of reasonable outcomes to decisions, and if there were any, I could understand them in the context of the game's world. At approximately 30 hours, this game is quite short for many CRPG fans from what I've gathered, and at £35 it's asking a lot, especially when I can recommend it as someone's first computer role-playing game. Within 2 to 5 hours you'll have an idea of how you truly feel about the game, a feeling that is consistent throughout the game. Having said all this, I would like to echo what Mac from Worth the Buy has said about the game. It's like Marmite, you either love it or you hate it, and as Fatebringer, I will allow you to disagree with my judgment just this once.